Hey guys, welcome to another video. In this one we're gonna be building an API for our upcoming recipe app. We're gonna be using Hano for our API. We're gonna be using Drizzle for the database, and we're gonna be using Docker as a local database. Alright, let's not waste any more time and let's get cracking. Let's start off with pm create Hano API. This is going to create our boilerplate Hano app, and it's gonna take care of all the initial setup. Then let's open a new terminal, not like this, cd API, and then let's do pm dev, pm install, sorry. And then we can do a pm dev to see what exactly is happening. Localhost 3000, hello Hano, we are good to go. Perfect. So for an initial setup, because I know we're gonna be hitting ourselves with this problem later on, let's import course from Hano course. Almost copilot, almost. And then we can use the course as so we're gonna give it permissions on all routes, and then for the origin we're just gonna give it access from everywhere, and allowed methods are gonna be everything, and that's about it. So anybody from any route can get, post, put, delete. If you want to be a bit more, let's say, cautious, then in here you just allow the person that the hey guys, if you got so far and you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like and subscribe server that you want to respond for it. All right, perfect. Now that we have this, then the port is gonna be 3032, because I don't know what stuff I have running in my computer. So then 3032, like I said, I don't know what stuff is on here. So we have here hello Hano, we're all good to go. Perfect. Let's take care of our database. For this we need to create a Docker compose file, and I just copied over from the Docker repo Postgres official image. So I just used this one, if you don't know where I'm using this from. And the only thing that I did different, the normal Postgres port is 5432, and I'm mapping it to 5400. And the normal post for the adminer is 8080, and I'm mapping it for 7070. So that's the only difference. Other than that, no difference. Let's close out our terminal a bit, and let's do docker compose up and d. Once that we have this, we basically have Docker running. If by any chance you don't have Docker installed, then just install the desktop app, and then that command is going to work. It's really simple. Perfect. Now that we have taken care of this part, let's install Drizzle and its dependencies. And yeah, Drizzle ORM. We're gonna need PG, Postgres, and these are gonna be all our dependencies. And we need to add install for this ones. If not, it's for nothing. I use pm because I do open a lot of projects, and like that, the node modules are they're gonna be linked to one repo, so they're not gonna take up space in my hard drive. Perfect. Now let's install the dev dependencies, and it's gonna be Drizzle kit. Alright, now that we have this taken care of, let's create our drizzle.config.ts file, and in here we need to import type config from just types absolutely wrong copilot from Drizzle kit, and then we need to export default, and then our schema is going to be in db-schema.ts. Our out folder, which is going to be for the migrations, is going to be in drizzle-migrations. Our driver is going to be pg, and our db credentials is going to be the connection string. And almost there, it's going to be this one. If you use the same Docker compose file as me, and if you're following along, then this is going to be the connection string. Basically, it's formed from the Postgres, which is the Postgres protocol. Then admin is going to be the actual name, test is going to be the password, localhost 5400 is where the actual database lives, and then the recipe is the name of the database. So that's, let's say, the anatomy of the connection string. Perfect. Now let's create the db folder, which is going to have schema.ts. We're gonna need some stuff from Drizzle, which is gonna be integer, pg table, serial, text, timestamp, and varchar, and they're gonna be from Drizzle ORM and PG core. Alright, all the tables in my database, I'm gonna use them as a plural name. That's gonna be the easiest to follow, and that's gonna be the easiest to, the less error prone. I don't know how other people do it, this is how I do it. Recipes, and it's gonna be a PG table, recipes, and we're gonna have an ID, which is serial, and it's a primary key. For all the columns, so all the columns name, they need to be mapped for the SQL name. I usually use Pascal case for JavaScript stuff and camel case for the others. You're gonna see in a second. Name is gonna be varchar name, and it should not be null. Then the time to prepare is like this, not null, and instead of this we're gonna put a default of 0. If by any chance, we should be able to spot them with Zod when we're gonna validate on the front end, so we're not gonna let people have it like that, but just in case, it's better. Time to cook is gonna be again an integer with a default of 0. We're gonna have likes, which is going to be an integer again with default of 0, and then dislikes, then we're gonna have a created at, which is going to be a new date, and then updated at, which is gonna be the same thing. Alright, so this was our recipe staple. We're gonna continue with ingredients and instructions. And Copilot guessed it right. We're gonna have an ID, a name, created that, updated that. The only thing that it actually missed, it's the recipe ID, which is going to be a serial for recipe ID, and it's gonna reference, and it takes in an arrow function, recipes.id, and when we delete, we want to cascade. So what does that mean? That means if I delete a recipe, it's gonna delete all the ingredients and all the instructions. So we're not gonna have random ingredients and artifacts linking to recipes that don't exist anymore. And then export const instructions. Instructions is going to be a PG table, and then same thing, but instead of a name, we're going to have a description. Okay, this was our database schema. Now we're going to be creating, sorry, I think, yeah. So this is not going to be a varchar. This is actually going to be text because the instructions will be large. Okay. Okay, now let's move on and create the actual client, the database client, and that one is going to be quite easy. We're just going to import Drizzle from drizzleorm, and it should be the Postgres JavaScript, and then we're going to import Postgres from Postgres. Now, module Postgres has no exported member Postgres. So in order to fix this thing, we just need to use the ES module interlope in here, and then let's put it to true, and this fixes that error. Or it should have. And now it's fixed. Then the actual client, it's Postgres, and here we just need to pass it our connection string that we configured here, and prepare false. And then we're going to export our DB, and we can use it wherever we want. Now, I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. This stuff I actually found on another repo, and I just blatantly stole them. So migrations generates migrations, drops them. This pushes the latest migration to the database, and this opens the studio. Now, we actually now have a schema. We have the client working and everything. So we can actually do a pm migrations generate. And you're gonna see now a folder being created here as migrations, and all the tables are gonna be created, and at the bottom you're gonna see the constraints and the foreign keys added on these tables, even that cascade. And yeah, and I think that Drizzle is pretty cool with this, and I'm starting to like it a lot more than Prisma, because I feel like with this project at least I learned a bit more SQL than I ever did with Prisma, and I think that's a win. And now let's do a pm db push, and now the changes have been applied. And now if we do pm studio, and if we open our Drizzle Studio, we're gonna see recipes, instructions, and ingredients, the tables that we created. Now, we don't have any data, so that sucks. Let's change that. Creamy chicken Alfredo. Time to prepare 10 minutes. Time to cook 30 minutes. Let's give it one like. Let's save the change. The instructions. Recipe ID 1. Instructions. Just cook it, bro. Save one change. Ingredients. Add record. Recipe ID 1. Name. Cheese. Save. Add record. Pasta. Recipe ID 1. Now we have a recipe with instructions and ingredients. Let's see how we can actually get this recipe in our API. So the best way to handle this is to actually create an API route. So for this, we can just create here an api.ts, and this is where our API is going to live. Let's import Hano. let's import our DB. Let's import the schemas and instructions. And I think that's all we need to import for now. Let's initialize the API, and it's gonna be a new Hano. Now, if somebody actually just tries to access this route, we're gonna send back a text because he's not where he's supposed to be. Let's first start with recipes, and all the APIs are gonna be again in plural, even if we only want to get one. So because now what we want to achieve is when we hit the API and recipes, we want to get all our recipes. So we want to get an array of recipes. When I actually did a small test of this app and I tried to run it a bit and to see how to make it work with joins and everything, I've done it like this: from recipes dot left join, and I left joined the ingredients, where we need to import equal where ingredients.id equals to recipes.id. Then I've done another left join for the instructions, and then I've done the group by recipes IDs. And I thought this would work. Let's test it out to see exactly what happened. App.route API. We actually need to export this. Export default API. And now in here we can import it and use it. And let's actually pm dev. And because we're doing this, we actually need to add ingredients.id and instructions.id. And you're gonna see here that only one ingredient and one recipe and one instruction. And we want all three ingredients. So this is not good. So in order for me to resolve this, I've done the following. In here on the select, I want to have the ID as the recipes.id, the name as the recipes.name, time to prepare, you guessed it, time to cook, likes, dislikes, ingredients, and in here the magic happens. We want to SQL is going to be a string like this, and in here I want to use raw SQL for this. So I want array aggregate, and I want to get the ingredients name, and I want to get them as ingredients. And this is going to be a string. Then I want to get the instructions. Because we know we're only going to have one instruction, I want to get the description. And finally, I want to get the created at and updated at. And we're going to group them only by recipes ID and instructions.description. We don't need to add the ingredients anymore because we're actually going to aggregate them. And now we get the ingredients as needed, but we should be getting 2 ingredients, and we're only getting 1. So we need to see what's happening. We just messed this up. It's recipe ID, and in here its recipe ID. Okay, now we get the full recipe. So we get the ID, the name, time to prepare, time to cook, likes, dislikes, ingredients, instructions, and the created and updated item. Now we can easily replicate this for an individual recipe. So let's do it. For this, we just need to add the ID here. We need to get the ID parameter. We need to parse it as an int, and we do c.request.param, and we give it the ID. And now, instead of using this recipe's ID, we can just use this. And in order for this to actually work, we're gonna need to put a where recipes IDs equals to the recipe ID that we got from the param. So now if we go to 1, we're gonna see something. If we go to 2, nothing will be there. And let's make this one a bit nicer. If we have a recipe, then let's return it. If we don't, recipe not found. And the select actually returns an array. So if the length of that array is greater than 0, then we can return the recipe. If not, we can return this message. And because here we're using an individual select, we don't really need to return an array, and we can just return the recipe. Okay, now that we have our individual getters, let's take care of the post route. So it's gonna be pretty simple. API.post, we're gonna get recipes. It's still going to be an async function. And now we can just do this. We need to actually parse the JSON body, and for that Hano provides us with a really nice API. So we know we're going to get the name, time to prepare, time to cook, ingredients, and instructions. And they're going to be coming from the request, and we can parse it as JSON. Let's now create a type for our recipe, because we will be needing it in our future requests. And body is going to come as with these functions, so we can just omit, and we can omit these parts from the actual recipe, and we need to actually await this. Okay, now in SQL there is a concept called transaction. So a transaction is basically batching multiple SQL queries and using them as one individual instruction, as one command. And like always, Drizzle gives us an API for this. So the API is like this: await db.transaction, and then it's still going to be an async function. We get a tx out of it, and then the tx is basically our DB client. We want to get back the recipe ID. So for us to be able to do this, we need to add the values, and then, like always, Drizzle gives us a nice little API for this, and then we want to get back the recipes.id. The recipes return actually returns an array. So if the recipe ID is going to be a recipe return of ID. Now that we have our recipe ID, we can add the ingredients. Continue adding the ingredients, and because we are parsing the ingredients the same name as the schema, we need to change this and use actually instructions body, so we're not going to have any name conflicts. So we're going to be mapping over the instructions body, ingredient, and then now TypeScript and JavaScript is happy, and the same thing with the instructions. And we want to return back from this the recipe ID. And for the return, we want to return the ID of the newly created recipe. So just to recap what this does, we created a transaction, and then we create the recipe, insert the ingredients, insert the instructions, return the recipe ID, and then from the API route, we return back the entire JSON. Now we need to do the delete route, which is actually going to be the simplest ones, because Copilot thinks that we actually need to delete all individual ones, but we don't, because we need to delete only the recipe, where recipe.id. This is what I told you about the plural, because even now I forgot that I'm using plurals and I use singular. Perfect. So now we just need to await the db delete, and where the recipe ID is the recipe ID that we got from this request. We now need to create a put, and the put request is pretty simple. And let's see what Copilot gives us. And it didn't really give us too much, to be entirely honest with you. So we don't get the ID, the likes, dislikes, created at, updated at. So we create again another transaction, and then we update the recipes and we set the name time to prepare, time to cook, which is correct, but we need to update the updated at, because if we want in the future to add some filtering or some sorting, we can sort them by updated time. And we actually need to know which which recipe we are updating, because we're not updating them all. Then we're going to delete the ingredients, and we're going to be replacing them with new ones. Same thing is going to go with the instructions, and we're going to add the new ones. And as a message, we're going to say a message as recipe updated. Let's do the final two routes, which are going to be two patches. And we have this. We get the recipe ID, where the actual likes, we're going to take the current number of likes and we're going to increment 1. And the same with dislikes, we're going to take the current number of dislikes and we're going to be incrementing it with 1. You're going to see this error here, and in order to fix this bad boy, the library in TS needs to point to ES 2015, and now TypeScript is happy. Alright, so this was the project. If any of you got it this far, congrats. It's a cool little project. We're gonna add a UI to this, and yeah, it's gonna be really fun.